Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenborough, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Burnley but bring you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha and Scott Dan after the game. So let's begin. Wilfried Zaha's second goal in 2 games got Palace started before Schlupp punished Ben Mee for a fluff clearance to give Roy Hodgson's side a well-deserved 2-0 away win at Turf Moor. Palace started like a home team with a trademark penetrative run from Wilfried Zaha, which saw the winger win a free kick in the corner of the penalty box down Palace's left flank. From the resulting set piece, Luka Milivojevic went close with a whipped effort that fizzed just over the bar. From a trademark Zaha moment to one of Burnley's own on 10 minutes, a long ball from Ben Mee into the box, knocked down by Chris Woods to Jack Cork on the edge of the area, with the midfielder's effort going close without troubling Vicente Guaita. Palace were being forced to drop deeper and defend in solid banks, which limited Burnley's pressure to further efforts from that side of the box. Dwight McNeil going closest during that spell, with a deflected effort on 17 minutes that Guaita adjusted well to accommodate for the ball's change in flight and pace. Burnley were forced into making a first half sub, with Charlie Taylor going off after the Clarets had defended back-to-back corners, with Eric Peters replacing the left-back on 37 minutes. Palace thought they capitalised on the personnel change in Burnley's rear guard when Aye tapped home from close range. However, Van Aanholt was penalised for being offside in the build-up. The move itself was a great one for the Eagles, starting with Van Aanholt being released down the left-hand side. With no teammates in the box, the fullback cut back well to Andros Townsend, who faked an attempt on goal to create himself some space and chipped a delightful ball to Cheku Kouyaté at the back post. Unfortunately, the midfielder didn't connect as he would have liked, which saw the ball go across the goal, which is where Van Aanholt found himself in possession again but in an offside position. Just before half-time though, the Eagles had their lead. Zaha with his second in as many games, with a goal that seemed to catch Sean Dyche's team unaware. Collecting the ball on the left, the winger drifted rather than dribbled into the penalty area, past Phil Bardsley before arrowing through Nick Pope's arms. Burnley started the second half the way that Palace ended the first, in the ascendancy, and their explosive start almost paid dividends when a sustained period of pressure saw Peters volley just the wrong side of Guaita's post, into the side netting. Burnley again went close on the hour mark when Wood latched on to Kouyaté's header back to Guaita, and despite being in front of goal with plenty of time, the striker blazed over, a let-off for the Eagles. Another injury forced the second substitution of the game, this time for Palace, with Scott Dan unable to continue and Mamadou Sakho coming on for his fellow centre-back. The game was a physical battle, mainly in the middle of the park, with both managers making further substitutions as they looked to score what would be the next vital goal. Dyche swapping Ashley Barnes for Jay Rodriguez, with Hodgson subbing off Townsend for Jeffrey Schlupp. But the Clarets couldn't find their way through a resolute and impressive Palace side, and it was Hodgson's tactical tweaks that made the difference. Schlupp picked up a loose ball from an awful Mee defensive error, controlled superbly and then fired low and hard past Pope. With 10 minutes remaining, Hodgson's side had made their point safe. With one corner of Turf Moor bouncing, the Eagles continued to soak up the Burnley pressure, and any late fight back from the Clarets was being thwarted by Guaita, with 2 incredible saves in quick succession. Firstly, the keeper stood firm from a McNeil effort, and then a minute later the Spaniard pulled off a miraculous save from a Rodriguez header that didn't seem possible. An impressive win on the road for the South Londoners to close off November with a great performance and 3 points ahead of a busy upcoming Christmas period. So I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. So if you are someone like me who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts, whether that be on Twitter or Facebook, then of course do head over to the respective sites and follow our accounts on there at Crystal Palace. Now, like I said, obviously if you do want a place to get all the latest Palace news, so sort of your general news about the club, whether that be about the academy, the ladies team, stuff to do with the stadium, and all sort of general stuff about that, and you want a place to get all the latest news in one place, And of course, I would highly recommend you do follow us on there. And of course, we also keep it up to date with the latest transfer news as well. So even though we're not even in the January transfer window yet, there's loads of rumours about players coming in, players going out, rumours here and there, and obviously, you know, sort of interviews with agents and things like this, which are all obviously coming around already. So if you do want a place where you can get all the latest transfer news, you know, as soon as there's a rumour, we put it up there. So if you want a place so you can engage in that, keep up to date, as well as obviously having a discussion based upon that, of course, follow us for that as well. And then obviously, alongside sort of the news side of the aspect of it, we obviously post interviews on there, whether that be with players, with management, with agents, again going back to that, and of course our own opinions as well. So if you do want sort of a whole Palace account for both the news aspect, the sort of interview aspect, as well as just sort of our opinions as well, whether that be, you know, after the game, giving that instant match reaction, or before the game, sort of reacting to injury news or things that's happening. If you do want, you know, an account where you can get all the latest news, as well as a few different opinions, as well as just sort of any other stuff that we find or think you guys might find interesting, and of course do head over to our sites and follow us on there at eCrystal Palace. And obviously a great place for you guys to obviously share your opinion is in the YouTube comments. So if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, obviously where you rate your players' performances from 1 to 10, and that is with 10 being the best. Now, I say this every week, but the reason I want you guys to do that is just so you guys can share your views of the game with me, and I can compare how you thought the players performed to obviously how I thought the players performed, and of course we can have a discussion based upon that, because of course you may think one player done something in particular really well and I might have missed it, or I may have rated someone too highly and you think actually they may not have had that great a game. So of course, do feel free to drop below in the comment section your player ratings, obviously rating the players' overall performance. And even if you don't want to do that, just comment below with your general views of the game, because obviously from a Palace perspective, really good away performance in terms of just how solid we were defensively, and obviously going forward the quality of the goals we scored were also very good in terms of they're not easy sort of positions to score from, but obviously the players still managed to score from them. And of course a Burnley perspective, if you find yourself listening to the podcast, they're obviously going to feel like it's just a bad day at the office. It wasn't necessarily a bad performance from Burnley, it's just the fact that we dealt with them so well that ultimately they couldn't do what they normally would like to do. And you know, something I've talked about recently in terms of us in the midfield in particular, frustrating the opposition, we done that to a T. The whole team was frustrating Burnley so much, and that's sort of where our good play came from. So like I said, if you do want to share your views in terms of players' performances, feel free to comment below with your player ratings. And even if you don't want to do that, share your general views of the game, because once again, much like the player ratings, it's just something I can read, compare what you thought of the game to my opinion, and of course we can have a discussion based upon that. And you know, in the podcast, if there's anything you might disagree with me, or something you think I've missed, once again feel free to comment that below in the comment section, because you know I'm always open to have discussions, and that's the whole point of the comment section. So of course, if you guys want to get involved, of course feel free to do so below. So if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I've mentioned, or join our Facebook group, then do check all the links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting to go with Vicente Guaita, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. So in terms of Guaita's performance, obviously the first thing to start with is that fantastic save he made towards the end of the game. And in fact there was two sort of towards the end of the game, but that one save in particular, which of course has been circulating all around social media. You know, I couldn't believe it when I saw it, and you know, even looking back at the replays, it just gets better and better in terms of that save. And that's really where I want to start with, because I've given him an 8, obviously because his overall performance was good, probably deserving a 7, but for that world-class save in particular, you know, the reflexes, the position, the way he flicked the ball out of the way, and just even looking back at it in slow motion, just the way he managed to actually get to the ball in the first place, all of that just really put together just showed how much of a obviously of a good game he had, but obviously it was nice to see him actually have a fantastic world-class save to show for it, because that's the only way I can describe it, because I haven't seen as good a save from a Palace keeper so far this season, and certainly that's got to be save of the season from a Palace perspective, because it was so great. But actually moving alongside that, obviously that was a fantastic save. He made another one as well, I think just before that. But actually the game as a whole, I just think he makes obviously the whole back four just feel a lot more comfortable. And given the fact that we've had loads of injuries, obviously Cahill weren't playing, you had Sacco coming off the bench, you had Dan going off, we obviously had Joe Ward dropped out, and Martin Kelly came in at right back. So there's been a lot of changes at the back in the last a few weeks or so. So the fact that Guaita is the ever-present there, he just makes the rest of the team confidence, confident. Doesn't matter who's playing in the back four. The fact that whoever's there feels comfortable with him really is something that I want to highlight, because obviously his save was good and that's the main talking point about his game and his performance. But actually, just the way he adapts to whichever back four he's playing with is something which, I really wanted to pick out, and was something in particular which I think really reflected in his performance. Now, what you've got to consider as well with this performance is that because the midfield and the defence done such a good job at frustrating Burnley, Guaita didn't actually have much to do for the majority of the game. Obviously, there were periods in the game and spells where, Burnley had a few chances on goal, put a few shots into the side netting, a few over, and of course the saves that Guaita had to make. But actually, aside from that absolutely world-class save he made, there wasn't actually too much more in the game really to talk about. And that's just because he done what he had to do. And then when called upon at the really, really crucial moment, I think it was already 2-0. But, at that point, 2-1, late in the game, Burnley could have a chance to get back into it. The fact that he just made an absolutely world-class save is, why I want to give him particular credit. And, as I'm recording this, on the Monday evening, he's obviously gone and also won the Player of the Month for November as well, and that is fully deserved, not just because of the game against Burnley, but throughout the whole of November he's been fantastic, and it was just a nice way to top off a good month in terms of having such a good performance as well as making as good as saves he made in the game. So once again here, for Guaita, another fantastic performance from him, and certainly deserving of the 8 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our defence, and that is the right back Martin Kelly, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, of course, something I've obviously talked about last weekend is in terms of the injury to Joe Ward, and obviously whether he'd be ready. He obviously wasn't ready, and that's why Kelly started in his place at right back. And, I said that, yes, he can do a good enough job at right back, but certainly last 2-3 seasons or so, we've seen him develop into a really good centre back. So, of course, I was a bit dubious. I know he can play right back, but whether he could actually have the same quality at right back that he has had at centre back this season, and he certainly lived up to expectations, and that's why I've given him a 7 overall, because whilst he wasn't as good at right back as he was at centre back, he still put in a solid shift for the team, done what he had to do. And in terms of just playing out of position, which is obviously, we know he used to play right back, but playing out of position now and just playing to his best of his ability, doing what he has to do to frustrate Burnley, as well as getting forward on a few occasions, is obviously something that really, really did impress me. And it's nice to see once again that we've got these options at centre back, but also we've got players who are versatile, who can play at centre back, can play at right back. And that's really what was important about this game, because of course we didn't have any other right back other than Joe Ward, so he's now gone injured, probably out until sort of early 2020, so of course 2-3 months or so. So Martin Kelly's going to have to step up, and this was a great game to do it, in terms of you've got your chance here, now stake your claim, and he's certainly done that. Came into the team, played at right back for the first time in ages, and without any fuss, without any complaint, done a professional job there. And long may that continue, because like I've said, Joe Ward's going to be out for a few months or so, so obviously Martin Kelly is going to have to make that position his own again, and just sort of translate what he's managed to develop in his centre back role, and just sort of add that to what he already had when he used to be a right back 4 or 5 seasons ago, and just sort of continue with what he's been doing at centre back, obviously in a slightly further, wider position. But in terms of his overall performance, can't really fault him, and that's why I've given him a 7. I think once again, going back to that point about him just changing positions, top professional, doing what he has to do for the team, playing either down the middle or out wide, and the fact that he always gives his all for the team is something that you've obviously got to give him credit for. And it's a real credit to have him in the squad, I suppose, because when he first came to Paris, obviously he was playing on and off, played at left back a few times, played at right back, and then obviously went through a spell not really being in the squad, not really being involved. But once I think it was Allardyce came in, obviously started playing him at centre back, and of course from then he's now started to play more. And it's really good to know that we've got someone now who at first didn't get given the chances, but now when he's basically a crucial team player in the Palace team, because of the fact that we can just call upon him to actually play anywhere in the back four. And that's something which I've really got to give him credit for, and it certainly did shine in this game here at the weekend against Burnley. So once again here, Martin Kelly, top professional performance, and certainly in terms of the clean sheet, fully deserving of getting that. So I'm now going to move on to the first centre-back, and that is James Tompkins, who I am going to give an 8 overall. Now, in terms of Tompkins, you know, obviously he's a player who's had his injury troubles this season, but given the fact that we've now got more injury troubles, he's obviously been put back into the starting 11, and actually, you know, he's sort of gone back to his best in the fact that I've given him an 8, but, you know, sometimes it takes players a few games or so to get back to their best, but this game, straight on the money, and a really solid, fantastic performance from him. Now, in terms of dealing with Burnley, I think he's done a superb job of that in terms of winning the headers, winning the tackles, just making life difficult for them, you know, being up for that physical battle, because we know how much of a physical team Burnley are. So the fact that he was able to do that and do it so effectively as well is why I've given him the 8 overall. And, you know, once again, going back to that point, he may still not be 100% fit. So the fact that he was just thrown back into the team a few weeks ago, and now he's going to be the starting centre-back for a few games or so, whilst, you know, people like Cahill and people like Dan come back from their injuries, is obviously going to be, you know, a lot of pressure on him. But if he can perform like this when he's still maybe not be 100%, then obviously it's really nice to know that in the next few weeks or so he's going to get better and better. But in terms of the Burnley attack, obviously we know they like to play long balls, like to get in behind, and, you know, people like Wood, we've seen him score loads of goals against us before, so we know the threat that they've got offensively. But, you know, Tompkins in particular, and that's why I've given him the 8 mainly, it's just the fact that he dominated that attack. You know, he made it life so difficult for the Burnley attackers, you know, by closing them down, making these challenges, just being in that correct defensive shape. Or, the whole back four really, being in that defensive shape, making life difficult for Burnley is obviously one of the reasons why we played so well in the game, because we were able to control the possession, control sort of the tempo of the game, and that was all down to us actually working as a team and just frustrating Burnley as much as we could. And certainly Tompkins was the mainstay in the team at doing that. So once again here, James Tompkins, fantastic performance from him. Going to have to step up to the plate now. Obviously just come back from injury, but he's going to be one of our only centre-backs for the next sort of few games or so. So hopefully he continues his good form there. But like I've said, this game here against Burnley dealt with them really well and fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the second centre-back in the team, and that is Scott Dan, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, in terms of Dan's performance, it was actually up until the point that he actually got injured, and that sort of seemed to sort of hamper his performance. He was actually having a really decent game, and, you know, much like Tompkins, was doing really well in terms of frustrating Burnley and just making it life difficult for their forward players. So of course in that respect that was obviously great to see. It was obviously just a little bit disappointing, not obviously that it was his fault, but obviously he was having such a good game, then picks up a little injury, and to be honest there were periods of the game where he sort of soldiered on, just went through it, so went through that pain barrier, tried to carry on, but as we saw with one of the chances that Burnley had, which I think it was Woods or Barnes actually just blasted it over, and, you know, it wouldn't even have been a conversion in rugby, so that was how bad his shot was. But that sort of chance in particular, you could see Dan tried to sort of clear the ball. As he's done that, he's obviously fallen awkwardly, or he's strained something, and he's obviously gone down onto the ground. And of course, following that, obviously Sacco came on in his place. So, you know, other than that injury, the fact that he was playing as well as he did up until that point, and the fact that he just soldiered on when he obviously did pick up the injury initially, that was obviously great to see. That sort of determination, that grit just to carry on despite having the injury in the first place. But two things in particular which I was really impressed with is how dominant he was in the air. So in terms of Burnley like to play long balls, so both Tompkins and Dan, you know, but Dan in particular, you know, in terms of actually going forward, winning them headers, clearing the ball, just being that dominance force in the air to make sure that actually no Burnley player can actually get on the end of any of these long balls. So he in particular done that really well. And in terms of actually passing the ball out from the back, we know Dan and Tompkins, they may not be the best sometimes at actually playing the ball out from the back, but Dan in particular here, given the fact that he hasn't played that much recently, the fact that he's playing here and actually played really well into being that calm, having that calm presence, I suppose, on the ball, to be able to pass well on the ground, to obviously allow us to maintain possession, to distribute the ball out wide to start our attacks. So, you know, them two things, so being dominant in the air as well as passing out from the back, were two quite real major factors in the fact that we played well, because defensively he was winning the headers, making sure that nothing could get past, and then obviously in terms of us going forward and having possession, he was there to obviously drive the ball forward and pass well. So once again here, I think Scott Dan fully deserves these 7 I've given him. And like I said, the fact that he picked up that injury but still managed to carry on up until that point towards the end of the game, where he of course eventually had to come off for Sacco, but, you know, aside from that, the time he was on the pitch, done a really solid shift for the team, and certainly fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our back four, and that is the left back Patrick Vanano, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now this one may come as a little bit of a surprise to some people, in fact that I've rated him so highly, but obviously I think he played relatively well in the game, particularly going forward. And then also, you know, if you look at some other places, social media, and particularly on the BBS as well, quite a lot of people were giving him praise in terms of his contribution in the game, in terms of both defensively and offensively. He played really well in this game, and I think, you know, on reflection, I do think the 8 is a fair result. Now, like I've said already, you know, in terms of touching on that point, I think he was very good defensively. You know, in recent games, I sort of questioned it, saying, you know, he was out of position too much, he was drifting in and out of position, weren't really being in the right place at the right time, and that was leading to him making mistakes defensively. Whereas this game here, he was very good defensively in terms of being in the right place, closing Burnley's players down, making life difficult for them, tracking back. Everything about his performance was a complete sort of polar opposite of what we've seen in recent weeks. So that, of course, was a real positive to see. But in terms of his forward play, that was even better. So if we're looking at his defensive work, probably a 7 out of 10. But then going forward, you're looking at an 8 out of 10. And that's why overall I've given it to him, because his contribution brought going forward just allowed us to play that slightly further up the pitch, allowed us to have a little bit more yardage on the Burnley players, allowed us just to have that presence in and around the Burnley box. And certainly it was down to people like Townsend, like Zaha, and Ayew as well. But obviously Vanano running up and down that left flank also played his part there. Now, of course, there was the opportunity where Ayew did score, but obviously it was ruled off for offside. Arguably in that situation there, it was a bit of a silly mistake from PVA in terms of actually being in that offside position in the first place, because if he hadn't have been there, the ball probably would have gone, or someone like Kiyate or Ayew could have gotten the end of the ball, but instead the ball's run through to PVA, he's whipped it back into the box, which is fine, but he's done it from an offside position, and he probably could and probably should have done better with that opportunity, because he was needlessly offside. There was no reason for him to be there, you know, because Ayew and Kiyate easily could have gotten the end of that chances. So if he had just timed his run better, or just not been in that place in the first place to obviously allow us to score that goal, and it not needlessly being offside, that would have been great to see. But, you know, we went on to score 2 more goals anyway, so it didn't matter. But, you know, if the game had turned out differently and Burnley had scored just before half-time, we really sort of would be ruining that missed chance in terms of, you know, needlessly being in that position. And I suppose the only good thing about him being in that offside position is that it shows his eagerness to get forward. So it's not great the fact that the goal got disallowed, but it was almost like he was too eager in terms of getting forward that he found himself in an offside position. So whilst for the rest of the game his attacking work was great and his defensive work was great, it was just that one moment there where it was like he was a bit too eager, got too far forward, and obviously, yes, it didn't matter in the end because we won 2-0, but obviously if we had scored that goal and if it did count, you know, it could have been a different story there. But, you know, at the end of the day, you've also got to look at that chance and go, yes, PVA was offside, but then if Kiyate had just hit it first time, then we wouldn't have had this issue, because Kiyate would have finished it, it would have been 1-0, and there would have been no discussion about it being offside, because of course Kiyate was there to hit it first. But, you know, like I've said already, you know, defensively I think he dealt with Burnley really well, and in terms of going forward he was even better there. So I do think on reflection for Patrick Vanano, 8 is a fair result, and certainly in comparison to his recent performances where I've criticised him quite a lot, it's nice to see him actually have a really good performance here where he gets both that defensive and offensive work really well and gets it sort of matched and combined together. And certainly we've got an important run of games coming up, you know, 6 games left in December I think it is, you know, really important games with teams sort of in and below us in the table. So we really need Vanano to get back to his best, have more performances like this, because this performance showed that actually when he's got his mind to it, he can be very effective both defensively and offensively. So once again here, I do think the 8 is a fair result. So now I'm going to move on to the first player in our midfield 5, and I think it was more of a midfield 5, more than sort of the 4-3-3 with the 3 midfielders, the 3 attackers that we normally would play, and that's just because Townsend and Zaha in particular were playing a little bit more further wide, and maybe a little bit more deeper than, let's say, in recent weeks where they've literally been focal points, almost playing sort of off Ayew as the striker. So I think, you know, midfield 5 is a fair sort of way to look at the game. So I might as well start with Andros Townsend, you know, primarily playing on that right hand side, and I'm going to give him a 6 overall, because I think at both ends of the pitch he done alright, toited about, done what he had to do for the team, and that was both obviously offensively and defensively, because of course coming back and helping defend against Burnley, he done that relatively well, and then going forward didn't have much effect, but he was in and around the box, and it may not have been his best threat in terms of being a threat. But then again, you could say, you know, sometimes players have an off game. Maybe he's not playing that great because maybe he's carrying an injury. You know, we don't know why he wasn't playing that great. It wasn't like he was lacking effort or anything. It just looked like that he did have chances to go forward, but didn't always take them. Didn't look the threat that we know he can be. So whether it's an injury, whether it's the fact that he's not playing well, don't know what it is, but you arguably could have done better in the game. So really, for me, I think the 6 is the only way I can sort of reflect on his performance. Can't really give him anything high, can't really give him anything lower, and I think there isn't really any real moments for me to talk about with his performance. So I think on reflection, the 6 is a fair result. Had contribution up and down the pitch, but no real quality, no real moments to talk about. So I do think overall the 6 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the first in our central midfield position, and that is Cheku Kouyaté, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. In terms of Kouyaté, I say this week in, week out whenever he plays, in terms of just how much of an engine he is in the midfield, how he uses that physicality, that pace, that sort of determination to obviously drive through down the middle, and that's certainly what we got in this performance here, and that's why I've given him the 6 overall. And superb engine is the perfect way to describe his performance, because that's what he exactly was. Loads of tenacity, loads of energy in the game, and the fact that he was able to do his defensive work by helping us be compact at the back and in the midfield, as well as actually going quite far forward, being available as well going forward, not just carrying the ball forward, but being there to actually get on the end of crosses, like we saw with that RU disallowed goal. You wouldn't normally see Kouyaté inside the box, so it was nice to see him actually do that defensive work, but also actually be available going forward as well. And I think the fact that he combined that ability to play multiple positions with his energy just allowed him to cover a lot of ground, and that's something I really liked about his performance, because it allowed us to deal with Burnley a lot better, because of course we had him playing more advanced, more defensive, so we can have that transition between the different positions on the field. And I think in terms of McNeil, who's been a great player for Burnley, Kouyaté was the key in terms of nullifying him, making him quiet in the game, because other than him missing that sitter, which was the only real negative of his performance, the good parts of his game came from him, nullifying McNeil, making these runs forward and being available in his advanced positions, and that's something that I really really like to see. There was also one chance that he almost gifted Burnley, which is also a needless chance that he gave away, which I could talk too much about, and I suppose that's what's restricting him at a 6 as opposed to a 7, because everything about his game was really great. In terms of being the engine, having lots of energy, being available going forward, great covering, nullifying McNeil. That was all great about his performance, but the reason I've given him a 6 as opposed to a 7 is just the fact that he missed that sitter, where arguably it was probably easier for him just to toe poke it in and score, and then arguably, the fact that he almost gifted Burnley a chance as well. So for them 2 mistakes, that's why I've given him a 6 as opposed to a 7, but a really solid performance from him. Lots of physicality, lots of pace and tenacity in the midfield, and certainly deserving of the 6. And with the busy Christmas period coming up, I don't know whether he'll be able to keep this same sort of high levels and high sort of energy levels in games, because certainly we've seen, with all the games we've got in December, it's going to be difficult for him to keep these levels of performances. But certainly with the squad maybe rotating and him playing, every other game, or him playing 2 games here, miss 1 here, 2 games there, whatever way Hodgson's going to sort of rotate the squad, certainly Kouyaté is one of these players who I think we need to rest him a little bit, only because he plays with so much energy that it could sort of be a negative thing in the games coming forward. But once again here, Kouyaté fully deserving of the 6 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to one of his midfield partners, and that is the captain, Luka Milivojevic. Going to give him a 7 overall, because I think, much like Kouyaté, done a fantastic job in the midfield, just minus the mistakes that Kouyaté had, and that's why I've given him 7 overall. Now, in terms of the possession we had, we don't really dominate possession normally, but I think we had something sort of 55% possession in the game, and certainly I haven't looked that up specifically, so if I'm wrong, please tell me. But I think at some parts of the game it was around that ratio, and Luka was one of the main reasons why we had so much possession, because he was the guy in the middle of the park actually holding on to the ball, and because he had possession, because he was maintaining control of the ball, dictating the play and the speed of the game, it obviously allowed people like McCarthy, like Kouyaté, to actually break forward, and Luka to obviously release them by passing the ball to them. So it wasn't just the fact that Luka was keeping hold of possession and doing the defensive work, but actually when we had the possession, he was making good use of it by actually spreading the ball out to people like McCarthy, like Kouyaté, and allowing them to go forward as well. And the fact that he combined his good work on the ball with the good work off the ball as well defensively, making challenges, being a real sort of leader in the team. Obviously he's the captain and you'll expect that from him, but there's been a few questionable performances, in terms of a captain's aspect from him this season. So it was nice to see him actually have a real solid performance, obviously in terms of how he was playing, but also just that way he was leading and the way he was sort of commanding the team as a whole. So once again here, a really solid performance from Luka, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. And obviously, like I said with Chiarte, maybe he could be a player that might suffer with all of the games we've got coming up in the next few weeks or so. But I think, as the captain and as someone who's played, I think, almost every minute last season, bar injuries or whatever it was, he's a player who's going to be really crucial for us in the upcoming games, because we really need him to step up, not really get too fatigued by the game with the amount of games we've got coming up, because of course performances like this show how crucial Luka can be, both defensively and offensively in games. And in sort of, Burnley are no easy team to beat, so we obviously done it really, really well to contain them, and obviously it was down to our midfield work in particular. So of course Luka there, being the mainstay of that midfield, we've got to give him a bit of credit there. So in terms of the final player in our midfield 3, or the central midfield part of our team, and that is obviously James McArthur, I'm also going to give a 7 overall. Now in terms of his work, much like Chiarte, an engine in the team in terms of covering a lot of area, always looking to get involved, running up and down the pitch, doing the defensive, doing the offensive work, and that's exactly what I got from his performance, and that's why I've given him a 7. And I suppose the way you could describe it is all action, because everything we ever seemed to do sort of evolved around, if it was in the middle of the pitch, evolved around people like McArthur, like Chiarte, actually being involved in the action and allowing us to obviously go forward like we did. And I suppose one of the main reasons he did so well in these offensive positions is just how well he was playing deceptively, in terms of actually making these clever runs by deceiving the opposition, by getting in behind, getting into good positions. And it wasn't just the runs itself, it was actually the passes that actually broke the lines as well. So not only was he being the receiver, he was also being the provider in terms of deceiving the opposition and getting in behind. So not only was he involved in the play in terms of just putting tackles in, running and covering a lot of ground, but actually in terms of making these runs, making these passes, he was also quite integral to that. And in terms of the way we played, in terms of restricting Burnley in the midfield and having control of possession, particularly in the centre of the field, that was all down to people like McArthur playing as well as they did. Now, I suppose this is a performance, which obviously I don't want to talk about Max Meyer too much, because I personally think he should be in the team, but of course he isn't, and some people think he's not good enough, some people think he should be given a chance, like myself. But this is sort of a performance we'd like to see from Meyer, and we've seen from him previously, in the fact that maybe the way McArthur was playing in terms of making these runs and making these passes, maybe it's not as pretty as Max Meyer, but in terms of that output, in terms of making the passes, making the runs in the first place, even though they're not as pretty, that's what we expect from Max Meyer, and that's what we got from James McArthur here. So maybe that's something obviously to consider. We've got all these games coming up, so at some point people like Camarasa, people like Meyer are going to get a chance in the team. But I think definitely in terms of the way McArthur was playing was a little bit more effective than Meyer's been this season. But I think when Meyer's given a chance, he can do what McArthur did, maybe, but obviously a lot more prettier in terms of the quality he's got on the ball. So once again here, James McArthur, a really solid performance from him, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. The fact that he was involved both defensively and offensively in the midfield, and the fact that he was able to contain Burnley as well as he did, is why I've given him a 7. And like I've said, with the games coming up, we're obviously going to have to rotate our midfield, but it's nice to see actually coming into the 6th sort of run of the games we've got coming up, that run of 6 games with teams in and around us. That's a really good time for us to pick up points, in the run up to the new year. So we really need to obviously rotate our midfield, but also we need people like McArthur, like Luka, like Chiarte to maintain performances like we saw at the weekend, because certainly the work they did, the hard work and the energy they put into the midfield, was one of the reasons why we were able to contain Burnley as well as we did. So once again here, James McArthur, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the winger, Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now in terms of Zaha's performance, obviously I talked quite a lot last weekend, the fact that he scored against Liverpool and arguably, got back to his old self in terms of having a fantastic man of the match performance there. And, this game against Burnley was no different, 2 goals in 2 games, and certainly the goal itself was really good, but his overall attacking performance as well was even better. And it's nice to see actually Wilf get back to his best, put all the stuff, is obviously the rumours at the beginning of the the beginning of the season, obviously to do with transfers, obviously getting back into it, sort of the second half of the games we've played so far this season, and it's now sort of he's settled from that part, the transfer, he's settled in terms of getting back into the season, and now he's starting to get back to his old self, which is of course really great to see. Now, in terms of his overall performance, I've given him the 8 because I think it was a really sort of controlled performance in terms of whenever we got the ball, whenever we had possession, we were getting the ball to Wilf, and he was absolutely terrorising the Burnley defence in terms of he was controlling the performance in terms of dictating how we were playing, you know, whether we were going down the left, whether we were going down the right, you know, if he was going to run with the ball, whether he was going to pass it in and look for 1-2s. Everything about his performance was really controlled and really effective in terms of, you know, making life difficult for Burnley. Now, of course, you know, he obviously scored the goal, but obviously he had loads of other chances in the game, you know, playing himself in, you know, creating chances for other people as well. So obviously his overall attacking contribution was great in terms of him getting the goal. But aside from the goal, you know, he was really effective offensively, and of course, as always, or as he almost always is, you know, being a constant threat, you know, using his pace, using his trickery, using his skill, using sort of his cutbacks and, you know, trickery of the feet, using all of that to obviously, you know, get the better of the defenders of the opposition, which he's certainly done up against people like Ben Mee, and you know, he done that constantly, and that's why he was a constant threat throughout the game. Now, of course, you've got to look at Burnley and go, you know, it wasn't the fact that Burnley was just bad, it's just the fact that we were better than them, and you could see, you know, they were actually terrified of them, because whenever Zaha got on the ball, you know, he was doing all these tricks, using his pace to get in behind, and as we saw with the goal, in terms of the ball came to him, he took on a defender, went to go to the left of him, then obviously done a little sort of drawback, cut inside, and obviously slotted it under Nick Pope. And you know, obviously Nick Pope maybe should have done better there, but it just goes to show the power on it, and the fact that he sent the player the wrong way in the first place to get into that position. Everything about his performance was sort of summarised and sort of epitomised with that goal, and the fact that everything he'd done throughout the game was similar to that, and then he finally actually got something to actually show for his performance. And you know, that's why I've given him an 8 overall, because his overall attacking performance was great to see. Great to see him, you know, terrorising the back four. Great to see him actually having a control on the game in terms of dictating how we would play offensively. And of course, just to sort of make it even better, and just to put that cherry on top of the cake, the fact that he scored that fantastic goal was of course great to see. So once again here, Wilfried Zaha, fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. Obviously, moving on now to the final player in our starting 11, and that is the striker Jordan Ayew, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, to be honest, there isn't too much to say about Ayew's performance in terms of moments, other than obviously the goal that was disallowed for being offside, and I talked about that with PVA and Kiarte. You know, PVA shouldn't have been offside, and Kiarte probably should have hit it first time anyway. So aside from that chance, which of course Ayew did score, but obviously it was offside, aside from that, I think he worked hard in the game, but he didn't really have that many chances in the game other than that one he had, and he didn't necessarily, you know, actively look to get into these positions to have chances himself. So obviously he done the hard work right, you know, he was working hard, chasing things down, but he never seemed to actually get on the end of chances, or never seemed to sort of have that little bit of magic or that little moment which could have allowed him to get into a position to score, because he wasn't necessarily bad. That's why I've given him a 7, because he wasn't terrible in the game. It's just the fact, given how good we've seen him be this season, you know, he done all of the hard work, had all of the energy, but had nothing to show for it, didn't have any chances, didn't have any goal, didn't have any assists, and that was the thing that I would have liked to see a little bit more from him, just a little bit more contribution rather than just having the performance there, because his effort was there, you can't fault him for that, but of course it's nice to see a little bit more quality added on to that. But once again here, I do think the 7 is a fair result. Not really much more I can say about his performance, but certainly with the Christmas period coming up, and the fact that, you know, obviously he's scored loads of, he's already scored, you know, was it 3 or 4 goals this season, but he's going through a dry spell here last few games or so. So whether we rotate the team over the Christmas fixtures we've got, just to obviously freshen up, bring Benteke in, bring someone else in just to freshen up the team, or whether we just stick with Ayew and try just to get the ball to him a little bit more, just to get him more involved, whatever it is, you know, we'll see what happens over the next sort of few weeks or so, and whether Ayew, you know, can get back on the score sheet, or whether he can have performances like this where yes, he works hard but doesn't have anything to show for it. So I'm now going to move briefly on to the 3 substitutions we made in the game. Mamadou Sakho, Jeffrey Schlupp and Christian Benteke were the ones we made. In terms of Sakho's performance, you know, he came on for Scott Dan. Obviously he was brought on to help us see the game out, and he done exactly that, maintained our clean sheet, and it was nice to see him back firstly, but primarily nice to see him actually keep the clean sheet. And I'm going to give him a 7 overall, because of course he hasn't played in a while, so it was great to see him back in the team. Obviously he needs a run of games to get back to his old best, But, you know, it was nice to see him actually get these minutes and actually perform well as well, because he clearly isn't match fit yet. But if he can perform like this, and if he can hold out for as long as he did, not being, you know, 100% fit, and actually go on to maintain that clean sheet, then that would be really great to see. And I suppose the way he performed here, not being fully fit, just shows how much of a classy player he is, and the fact that even when he isn't 100% fit, he can still perform well, and that was of course great to see. Of course, Jeffrey Schlupp obviously scored the second goal for Palace, a greatly taken goal. Obviously, Ben Mee made a defensive error, which obviously looped the ball up into the air. But in terms of Jeffrey Schlupp being in that position, killing the ball dead with that touch, and then just having that power and accuracy on that shot to get it past Nick Pope, it was really, really great to see. So whilst people may say, oh, you know, it's a lucky goal because of obviously the defensive error, actually the fact that Schlupp was in there in the first place in that position, the fact that his touch was good, and the fact that the finish was even better, really just goes to show how good Schlupp was. And that's why I'm going to give him an 8 for this game, because he came off the bench, and obviously you want your players to make an impact, and he made a really, really instant impact, and he was very effective coming off the bench. He brought us that little bit more pace, a little bit more energy than we'd be missing previously in the game. Obviously we played well, but he just brought on that little bit more pace, a little bit more physicality, and it was nice to see him actually score that goal, because it was really, really well taken goal. Obviously maybe Pope should have done better in goal, but the fact that Schlupp came on, done what he had to do, obviously got us that second goal which killed the game dead, as well as just, you know, having his normal sort of energetic performance, you know, just having a little bit more muscle than Burnley had, just allowing us to continue to hold on to that lead we had, and obviously building it, and then eventually see the game out. Everything about Schlupp's performance was really, really great to see. And in terms of Benteke, he wasn't really on long enough, can't really say too much more about his performance, but, you know, at the end of the day, there weren't really any real moments for me to criticise him for, and likewise, not really any moments for me to actually pinpoint and go, actually, you know, Benteke had a really, really good contribution there. But, you know, I think it's a really great result, and it was nice to see actually the players that came off the bench. Obviously, Sakho only came on because of an injury, but it was nice to see actually both Sakho and Schlupp actually make a real impact off the bench. And that's something we've always criticised Hodgson for, not making substitutions, but in the last few games or so, you know, the substitutions he has made have made a difference to the team, which of course was really, really great to see. Now, in terms of just a small summary of the game, you know, I think that obviously Burnley just had sort of an off day. They weren't great, but they weren't necessarily terrible, and I think it's just because we were more comfortable there, more than we were just dominating more possession, just having more control over the game than they had, and that's why we were comfortable throughout. Not because Burnley were bad, just because we were just better than them on the day. And to be honest, if we'd been a little bit more sharper, a little bit more clinical, certainly with that RU chance in particular, which was ruled offside, if we'd just been a little bit more aware, a bit more sharp, a bit more clinical, then maybe we could have scored a few more goals in the game. And likewise, maybe if Burnley had actually scored or been a bit more accurate with some of their chances, rather than skying them or putting them into the side netting, then maybe they could have also scored some goals there as well. But in terms of us, I thought we were very comfortable in the game. You know, if we'd been a little bit more sharper, we probably could have taken even more advantage and scored more in the game. But I think what you've got to look at Burnley, you know, Burnley are a good team, but sometimes a little bit one-dimensional. Maybe they might disagree, but personally for me, I always think that, you know, in terms of they were trying to play long balls, and our centre-backs were sort of just dominating that and stopping them doing that. And, you know, we sort of had them covered. Every dimension they had, every way they were trying to play, we had them covered. And that was down to our midfield and our defence just being compact and dealing with them really well. And I suppose, in fact, you know, sort of our only problems were sort of our own making. You know, it wasn't the fact that Burnley were putting us under pressure to make errors or to, you know, give them chances. It was all down to us actually making little errors here, which obviously was the only problem, which, you know, why Burnley played better at some parts of the game. But, you know, what you've got to look at the performance here is that it wasn't just individual players play well, it was an overall fantastic team performance. Very professional, you know, from the off, all the players doing what they have to do from the team. And likewise, you've got to look at the management team and go, actually, they got it right in this game. You know, they got the lineup right, they got the system right. And in terms of containing Burnley, the way we played obviously best allowed us to do that. And another thing really for me that I think really just sort of shined for me, and a lot of people have been saying it, and I obviously mentioned it already briefly, is just the fact that I think for once we can actually look at the subs and go, we actually agreed with them, they came on at the right times, they obviously made a good impact off the bench. And I think that's another reason why our performance was so good, because yes, the whole team performance was good, but when we brought the players off the bench, it obviously enhanced the way we were playing and just allowed us to build upon the good play we were already doing in the game. And that's something, you know, once again, going to give credit to the players for playing well, but also the coaching staff, Hodgson in particular, because we normally criticise him for making subs or not making subs. But you know, the fact that we actually got the setup right, we got the application, the way we were playing right, and the fact that we actually played the subs at the right times, we brought them on and they played well, was of course great to see. And you know, in the sort of on the contrary, in contrast, you've got to look at Burnley and go, you know, they just got their tactics all wrong. They tried to approach the game slightly differently than they normally would do, I suppose. And, you know, they didn't really have, it costed them because they didn't really have any real impact on the game. And it wasn't the fact that they were playing bad, it's just the fact that we were just playing better than them. And obviously, because we had both Kelly and Dan, and obviously Saka at some points as well, and of course we had Tompkins as well. So because we were playing so solidly at the back, it obviously just restricted Burnley. And obviously having someone like Dan and Tompkins in particular, you know, really difficult to get past. And that's one of the reasons why they couldn't cope. They couldn't actually get the better off of us. And that's just because we can cope with that aerial stuff. We dealt with that aerial threat. And that's why we were playing relatively well. And that's why quite a lot of the time, you know, the ball was fizzling around on the ground, because obviously they had to try something different to get past us. And I suppose, you know, they normally would play more long balls, but because of our defence, the way we were set up, the way we can defend against them, obviously meant they had to change their system again. Now, obviously one player in particular to talk about is Zaha. Obviously I gave him an 8 out of 10, but, you know, games like this is where he shows his class, in the fact that he can, it's not necessarily him carrying the team, but when he plays well, the whole rest of the team seems to play well. And this was a game where it actually strikes me how good he is in terms of the goal he scored, the quality of that, just the way he was constantly terrorising the back four, and obviously the way he brings other players into the game as well. And, you know, obviously it was nice to see him actually get back to his best, but also, you know, games like this is where he likes to thrive, and he can obviously score goals, as we've seen. So it's nice to see him actually get his second goal in 2 games, and hopefully this kick-starts something which you know, we've got 6 games in December coming up. This is going to be the time where actually Zaha nails down, gets concentrated, and actually sort of kick-starts his season again and actually gets going, because this game here was last 2 games really shown him getting back to his best, so hopefully he can continue that. And in terms of just, you know, the defence again, you know, we've got to talk about Kelly, because of course he's been great for us in the last few seasons or so, playing at centre back, because of course previously he played at right back. He's now gone back to right back for this game here, and it's like he hasn't been away. You know, he's done a professional job there, so you've got to give him credit there. And of course, you know, Ward's going to be out for the foreseeable future, so if we can have someone like Kelly, you know, stepping up to the plate and just taking that place in the team, doing a solid shift, that would be great to see as well. And then you've also got to look at the midfield as well. Give credit to people like Luca, Chiarte, MacArthur, just because, yes, they may have been a little bit wasteful a few times going forward, but the fact they were getting into these good positions, allowing us to dominate the possession, allowing us to contain the midfield of Burnley was obviously great to see. So overall, you know, it's a really, really great team performance, but I wanted to pick out just a few of them players there, because of course they do deserve credit for the way they were performing in the game here. And I suppose for me, really, you know, a good performance here. And obviously with the games we've got coming up, we've got the likes of Burnley, we've got Watford, Brighton, Newcastle, West Ham, Southampton. So we've got real big games coming up, real good chance to obviously pick up loads of points, touch wood, before January and going into the transfer window there. You know, we've got a real chance to pick up points here. So if we can continue with performances like this, build upon this real positive result, get Zaha back scoring again. He's already scored 2, so let's see how long he can carry on that streak for. Let's get, you know, Guaita continuing to make good saves. Let's get our back four solid. If we can continue with these sort of things going forward, then hopefully in the next few sort of games or so, and particularly, you know, through December where we've got loads of games, hopefully we can pick up some good results. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match and who I thought the biggest influence in the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now, when you consider how good our overall team performance was, it was actually quite difficult to pick out 4 players in particular, because, you know, across the team, you know, whether that be in goal, whether that be in defence, in midfield, and obviously in attack, we were just obviously good across the field. We were able to contain Burnley and obviously just able to dominate possession and play as well as we did. And I think, you know, you've got to give credit obviously to the management, the way we set up, but obviously to the players in terms of actually taking it upon themselves and actually just performing really, really well. And, you know, we've had difficult games coming recently, you know, really, really difficult run of games against the top 6 teams. So the fact that we were able to come out of them games and actually not let that sort of affect us by obviously only getting 1 point out of them 6 games, You know, the fact that we didn't let our heads drop and we came out here with such a good performance is obviously a credit to the team as a whole. But obviously the 4 players I've picked out, you know, give them a little bit more credit because obviously their contribution was even more crucial to us getting the 3 points at the weekend. So I've gone with Vicente Guaita, James Tompkins, Wilfried Zaha and Jeffrey Schlupp. So in terms of Guaita, what can I say? Top draw performance from him. Obviously done the basics right, done what he had to do defensively. But that top-notch, world-class save he made in the game, in terms of just the reflexes, the positioning, the dive, the flick, everything about that save was absolutely fantastic, absolutely world-class. And that's why I've put him forward for this week's Man of the Match award. In terms of James Tompkins, even though he wasn't 100% fit, the fact that he dealt with the aerial threat really, really well, managed to contain most of the stuff that was being thrown at him defensively, and the fact that he obviously was just able to play the ball out from the back on a few occasions as well, relatively well, is why I was impressed with his performance. Obviously, Wilfried Zaha, his overall attacking performance was obviously top-notch, you know, in terms of terrorising the back 4. But of course, in terms of the goal he had, you know, in terms of, you know, going to dribble one way but not, and then you obviously you cut back inside and get past one player, then just the power on the shot as well to obviously get it past Nick Pope. You know, obviously his performance was good overall, but the goal was even better. Fantastic goal, really, really well taken, and you know, like I've said, the skill to get past the first defender and then the power to get it past the goalkeeper is why I've put him forward for this award. And of course, the final player, Jeffrey Schlupp, you know, the fact that he came off the bench made a real impact, not just because of the goal, but in terms of the energy, the pace, and everything he brought to the team was obviously great to see. And, you know, in terms of the goal, yes, it was a terrible mistake by Ben Mee, but, you know, great touch, great control to get the ball down, and of course the finish as well, straight into the opposite corner where Nick Pope is. Really, really great finish there as well. So obviously the rest of the team, I could really go on all day and, you know, put reasons why everyone really in the team should have actually got a position here. But I think these 4 players is a real fair reflection, you know, of our defensive work and obviously our offensive work in the game. And I think, you know, overall, you know, I do think I've narrowed it down to the right 4 players. But in terms for me, I think there's only going to be one clear winner here. And, you know, when you make such a real sort of world-class contribution into the game, I think there's only going to be one winner here. So congratulations for Shensei. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was yet another solid performance from you. And the reason I've given it to him as opposed to other players is for that world-class save he made in the game. Because if it wasn't for that, would have been... obviously we still would have been winning 2-1, but obviously that gives Burnley the chance to get that second goal in the game, and we don't really want that. So the fact that he made the save and the fact that the save was as good as it was is why I've put him forward for this week's Man of the Match award. Obviously feel free to comment below with your Man of the Match if you disagree with the 4 I've shortlisted, if you think I've missed someone out, and of course if you do agree with the shortlist, who you would have given it to. But for me, I do think Guaita is fully deserving of this week's Man of the Match award. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my Man of the Match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha and Scott Dan following the game.
Wilfried, enjoyable afternoon today.
Well, yeah, it was tough than it looked, but I enjoyed playing today. Happy to get a goal again.
Yeah, how good was that ball from Danzi to you? He said he didn't actually see your goal because he was on the floor in pain after playing that ball.
Yeah, he was in quite a bit of space, so I saw that he could look up and pick me out, and obviously Danzi's got the quality to do that, so I'm glad I could just take the opportunity, take the defender on and finish.
I guess when the defender's showing you onto your left foot, it's always nice to then score with your left foot. Yeah,
obviously I'm playing on the left. People are gonna obviously show me onto my left foot because they know I want to come in and shoot on my right. So it's a thing where I've had to practice on it, and obviously it's match day, so I've got to show what I practice on. So I'm happy to manage to get the goal. Really.
2-2 now. Are you feeling like? Did you change anything in your game, or were you just feeling a bit more confident?
No, the only thing, let me be honest, the only thing that I've changed is just worry about myself. That's it. Like, I used to just get annoyed about everything, the referee, the other team, my own teammates at times, the fans. I've just told myself my season starts now properly. From Saturday, basically, I was just like, worry about myself and do what I do. So I think it's making a difference.
Although it's a lot of hard work, having 3 games in a week, it's actually quite nice because it's a good opportunity to pick up some points quickly if you play well.
Yeah, I'd rather the matches than training anyway, so it's a decent time, and obviously there's no easy team in the Prem, but obviously we've gone through that run where we played the top sides, and now it's a chance for us to obviously build on this performance and get a few points.
You guys must be delighted with that result.
Yeah, nice to get the 3 points. Obviously, we've had a difficult run of games. Haven't managed to get as many points as we would have liked on the board, and yeah, it was nice to come here today and put in a good performance and get the 3 points.
Against a team that puts so many balls into the box, it's a tough one for you to come back in for.
Yeah, I mean, when you come here, you've been in a game, you know what to expect. It's nice to get on the pitch. Fortunately, not for the full game, but no, I thought we dealt with their threat really well, and especially early on, they're going to start the game well. I think towards the latter half of the first half, we started to play our football and look dangerous.
You got an assist there with the ball to Wilf. Is that one of the ones that you enjoy looking at after you play it?
To be honest, I can't remember. I remember playing it out wide, but then my ankle was a bit sore, so I was on the floor, so I didn't actually see him score the goal. It'd probably be 5 men and score. No, it's obviously it's nice. I haven't played much football of late. Obviously being fit, and the lads have been doing a good job. So you have to wait for your chance, and it's nice to come back in and contribute today.
How is your ankle? You went down a few times. Is it just nothing too serious?
I'm hoping not. I got a whack early on from a tackle, and it seemed to be getting better until half time, and then I think it just stiffened up, and I couldn't really move as I needed to. Got as much as I could out of the game, and yeah, obviously Mama come on and done well, and we seen the game out, and a great goal from Jeff to finish.
And finally, Martin Kelly playing at right back today. How great it is to have someone like him in the squad that can play in a couple of positions.
I mean, yeah, he's been here for pretty much all the time I've been at the club, and he's just a player who you can count on week in, week out. Wherever he's asked to play, he does a terrific job. I think he showed today. He come in, not an easy place to come in and start in a different position, because he hasn't maybe played many games there in the last few years. He's been playing at centre back a lot. Come in and done a great job, and yeah, I'm sure he'll carry on doing that.
Roy, lots of positives to take from that great away performance today. What pleased you most?
I think the way we got the balance right between defending and getting our tactics right defensively to deal with the crosses and the long balls into the penalty area. I thought the back four and the midfield players helping out dealt with that quite brilliantly. I thought our pressure from the front players, disturbing the long balls, the blocking of the crosses, I thought all that worked very, very well. But what also pleased me was the way we got the balance right between dealing with it, but not getting sucked into playing the same football ourselves. Whenever we got a chance, we got the ball down on the ground. We tried to play through the midfield. Luca was very important in that pivot position, getting balls from the centre backs, turning around and starting us playing. So it was a balance. I think the balance between defending as we have to defend, and all teams will have to defend when they come here because of the questions Burnley asked with their long balls into the penalty area, but at the same time not ourselves getting drawn into ourselves just kicking balls wildly clear and asking them to come again. We actually tried to get the ball down and play when we defended it, and as a result we created quite a few goal chances in the game.
Such a different game to ones you've had recently with so many balls coming to the box. Did you have to train differently this week to prepare for it?
Well, certainly we work very hard, and Ray Lewington and Dave Reddington and the video scouts do a fantastic job in putting together the videos for our team meetings, where we can really explain to the players this is what you're going to face, and we're showing it here as well as telling you about it. But we did actually do one session. We did a session on pressurising from the midfield on Tuesday, and on Thursday we actually did a session where we were overloading the penalty area, making it very hard for the back players, trying to work hard to get the midfield players filling in any holes that might appear there. So we did actually do some work on the field as well. But a lot of the work you do these days is not just on the field, it's in the video sessions, because the video analysts we have do such a great job, and Ray and Dave do a very good job with them in putting it together.
Jeff Schlupp with the second goal today. How great is it to have a player like him that can come in and play in a few different positions but also getting the goals?
I think Jeff could score a lot of goals. You know, he strikes the ball extremely well, not only with his left foot but his right foot, and he's good in the air. And he's in form at the moment, so we're very happy with Jeff Schlupp. In fact, we've got a few players in form at the moment who are not actually getting a chance to play. McCarthy's been exceptional in training as well. I'm looking forward to giving him a chance when the moment arises. But of course, all the time the team is playing as well as it is, and the players who I'm selecting are doing such a good job, it's not easy to be a substitute, because you realise that to get a chance, someone's got to start playing a little bit worse, or the team's got to start getting some worse results. And although we haven't had great results in the last 5 against the top 5 teams, we certainly couldn't really criticise the players for their performances.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha and Scott Dan had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Burnley. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Bournemouth. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.